Hey, what's up guys? This is JJ and this is a video in which I'm going to compare three archetypical types of fuzz pedals, and I'm going to talk to you about the appeal of fuzz pedals and what fuzz pedals mean to me. And for the purposes of this demo, I'm using three fuzz pedals. I'm using the Cuff Your Face 70s, which is basically a silicone fuzz face with modern benefits. I'm using the JHS Muffuletta, which is a Big Muff style pedal. It houses 6 different all analog Big Muffs in one single pedal format. And I'm using the Magnetic Effects, an English fuzz Solar Bender, which is basically a tone bender fuzz Mark II, but also with a couple of added features. In the intro song, I was using the Your Face for a fuzz face kind of sound. I was using the Solar Bender second for a typical tone bender tone, and I was using the JHS Muffuletta for a typical heavy Big Muff style fuzz. Now, what I would like to talk to you about first is the origin of distortion in guitar pedals and where it comes from. Fuzz pedals date back to as early as the early 1960s. One of the first fuzz pedals, the Maestro FZ1 fuzz pedal, that was used by Keith Richards on the Rolling Stones' Satisfaction. That is the archetypical fuzz sound, and most archaic fuzz pedals are derived from that design. So for instance, the Tone Bender Mark I, which was used by Jeff Beck in the Yardbirds, and the Tone Bender Mark II, which was also a favorite of many great players, are all derived from the Maestro fuzz tone. Very simple circuits with very few components. Then later on, in 1966, there came the Dallas Arbiter Fuzz Face, which has a little bit of a different sound, and that was hugely popularized by Jimi Hendrix. And of course it stood out because of its looks, because the original Fuzz Face had like a smiley face design with 2 knobs, and those were the eyes. Then in the late 1960s, the first Electro-Harmonix Big Muff was introduced. First they were called Foxy Ladies, by the way. Really when Santana started to use a Big Muff style pedal, it skyrocketed from there. Many great players have used the Big Muff. Frank Zappa, but also of course in the 90s it was hugely popularized by Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins, who used a Big Muff with a modification that allows you to take out the tone circuit for an even rawer sound. And also in the last couple of years by Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys, he uses a green Russian Big Muff. The JHS Muffuletta houses 6 Big Muffs from different eras, but I was using the Pi setting because I feel that is the most standard Big Muff sound. When you think of a Big Muff, that is the sound that's in there. What I like about fuzz, let's talk about that for a little bit. Because of course nowadays most amps have master volumes, so you can drive the preamp, have nice preamp distortion, but keep the volume of the amp itself within limits by means of a master volume control. Back in the 60s, when these types of circuits were developed, there was no such thing as a master volume guitar amp. So if you wanted to have distortion or more sustain, you would actually have to drive the amp really, really hard and be terribly loud. And this was before PA systems, of course. And that is why circuits like the Tone Bender became so popular. Jimmy Page, for instance, was simply looking for more sustain, and the Tone Bender gave him just that, going into an overdriven Marshall amplifier, and then the Tone Bender would take it into stratosphere. The appeal of fuzz to me is, as opposed to using amplifier distortion, I like my amps to be a little bit dirty, and I like to clean it up with the guitar volume, like this basic sound here. Bit of a breakup sound from the Vox AC15, and clean it up just a little bit for a squeaky clean sound. What a fuzz pedal does is, if I take the Your Face I have the fuzz set to full, but what's cool about a good fuzz pedal is that when you use it with the guitar's controls maxed out, you get a really dirty sound like. But when you roll back on the guitar's volume control, you can also get nice overdrive kind of sounds from it, with a good fuzz pedal, that is. I always feel that an overdriven amplifiers can sound a little bit generic, a little bit anonymous, and a fuzz pedal, since there are so many, there are thousands of circuits available, it can really make you stand out a little bit more, and you can have a more interesting sound with a fuzz pedal. What's cool about the tone bender and archaic fuzzes like that, I really like that part, is that they have what is called the Schmitt Trigger. And what that is the transistors need a certain level of input signal. If they don't get that high an input signal, the pedal can sound as if it can't make up its mind. It's going to want to be on and off at the same time, so you get this sputtery kind of sound. And you can especially hear that on the decay of longer notes with the tone bender, like this. And with this magnetic effect solar bender, you can even exaggerate that effect. Listen to when the notes decay, what the pedal does. That's what I'm talking about. Like that. That is the Schmitt Trigger effect, and you can exaggerate that on this pedal, but there are tons of fuzz pedals that allow for you to set more of a gated kind of fuzz sound. What's also cool about fuzz pedals is when you roll back on the guitar's tone control, it's going to sound a little bit different, a little bit more fluty. I like that sound, especially with the tone bender and the Big Muff. Let me show you what I mean. Neck pickup. So fuzzes are not just great for heavier music styles or rock, but this can be a perfect lead tone for an R&B song, in my opinion. Let's do the same thing with the Big Muff. Okay, so there's a lot of things we haven't talked about yet. What about germanium and silicon fuzzes? You hear and read about those terms a lot. What is the difference between them, and how do they sound, and what should you look out for when you're shopping for a fuzz? Now, some of the earliest fuzz pedals all use germanium transistors. And germanium transistors have the characteristic of sounding really open, a little bit woolly, but very nice. But there was a big disadvantage back in the old days. They were very prone to temperature changes. So for instance, a fuzz face would sound different on any given night depending on the weather circumstances. That is why later on they started using silicon transistors in fuzzes, because they were more stable. But silicon fuzzes sound a little bit more gainy, sound a little bit more aggressive than a germanium transistor. Now this tone bender, the solar bender, uses new old stock PNP germanium transistors. A Big Muff houses 4 silicon transistors. That is why it's such an aggressive pedal. And fuzz faces come in different shapes and sizes. This is a silicon fuzz face, but you also have germanium fuzz faces. What I'd like to demo to you now is how you can use a fuzz pedal's headroom, and that means the volume that it has on tap, how you can use that to also boost the front end of your amp a little bit more. Because when you're playing at unity gain, the fuzz is going to color your sound, of course, but it's not really going to interact with the preamp of your guitar amplifier. So your face pedal has tons and tons of headroom, a lot more headroom than a traditional fuzz face, and you can use it to add the fuzz, but also really goose up the front end of that amplifier, so you get this nice melange of amp overdrive, because the amp's being pushed harder, and fuzz. And I'll do the same thing with the Big Muff, and that is, a lot of guys say, well, I'm using a Big Muff, but it sounds gnarly and it sounds aggressive, but it sounds nothing like David Gilmour, for instance. What Gilmour used to do is he used to push the front end of his amp also with the Big Muff, so you get a different kind of sound. Let me just show you what I mean. Here's the basic amplifier sound. A little bit of breakup, and you're also hearing a little bit of delay that I added post-production. And now I'll let you hear the fuzz face boosting the front end of the amp. And now the Big Muff, and I've selected the Civil War setting on the Muffuletta. So with a lot of fuzz pedals, only then it really comes to life. Hopefully you've learned a lot about fuzz pedals in this video. What I tried to do was just basically show you that these are 3 archetypical fuzz pedals, the tone bender, the Big Muff, and the fuzz face, and the reason for that is that a lot of pedals are based on those 3 circuits. Of course, I haven't talked about octave fuzzes, for example, which is an entirely different breed, and hopefully I've taken away some of the prejudice that fuzz pedals are only there for players who like really fuzzed out, doomy sounds. Fuzzes can be heard in many types of music: classic rock, soul, R&B, pop music, indie, alternative, lots of different kinds of music, and they can be very, very versatile, and they can give you an original sound and make you stand out a little bit more. That's just my 2 cents. I will leave you with an example illustrating that you don't have to get all fuzzed out with a fuzz. I'll be using the JHS setting on the Muffuletta with the sustain set to minimum, and let you hear how you can get a nice overdrive distortion kind of sound with that. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe. Signing off, jan-jaap.